Welcome. So today is our move into stillness meeting. And so we'll cover some conceptual stuff, but I want you to remember that the conceptual stuff is important, but as a support, not in and of itself. So it's supportive, and it will help to facilitate an experience, and also by providing the right direction so that you know what to look for and how to look. And it will provide some useful guidelines so that you can be observing for the right kinds of feedback that will help with the process to make it experientially more potent, because so our goal, the intention here, is to reawaken our conscious awareness through somatic exploration. And what this means in a practical sense is that we gain or regain conscious, voluntary motor control, which means that an enormous amount of stuff that has been forgotten by us, we have forgotten, but that is nonetheless overwhelming us, plaguing us, bothering us, burdening us on a regular basis, on a moment-to-moment basis. It becomes conscious, and then we learn how to let it go so that we surrender. We have a practical means of that surrender to the intrinsic support that's always available. And this means that in a practical sense, we could say gain ease. We gain access to the underlying ease. So we want to get clear then on what it is that is happening that is obscuring that realization now. So we have all kinds of ideas about that. So to have this grounded in a practical sense, we come with a sense of a problem. Okay, so you notice that you have some sense of problem now. And whatever that sense of problem is, that the way in which you know that that is a problem is because you feel it. So there is feeling going on. So this feeling is part of this loop that I've talked about. So there's a loop that has two phases to it, but it's really one loop. So it's like two sides of a coin. You can't separate the two sides. It's one coin, but conceptually we can understand that there are two sides. So here, same thing. So there's two sides. Let's just say it's two sides, okay, because it's easier to talk about it that way. But it's one process. So the one side is the sensory portion, which means that we have sensory awareness, sensory perception. The other side of that is motor activity, meaning movement. So you can observe your experience and see that these go hand in hand. That's why we can't separate them meaningfully. They're just two aspects of one phenomenon. But if either one is not functioning optimally, then neither one is functioning optimally. And what that tends to produce over time is more of whatever the existing pattern is. So if there's let's say a maladapted functioning, then the tendency is for that to be reinforced over time. Why? Because we're practicing it. So the premise here is that we have a tremendous amount of maladaptive learning. And this maladaptive learning is unconscious. So it's functioning all the time So the motor control portion is playing out exactly according to this maladaptive pattern. The feedback that we get, however, is not coming all the way to conscious awareness. Instead, all that bubbles up to conscious awareness is, I don't feel good. I don't like this feeling. Something's wrong. And so it registers as some kind of pain, physical pain, emotional pain, psychological pain, however you understand it, some kind of discomfort. So now we want to notice that there's a disconnect. In order for us to be able to make a positive change, it needs to be made conscious. But it's all functioning unconsciously. So the learning, the maladaptive patterning is occurring at an unconscious level. So because it's learned. When it was learned, it doesn't matter. How it was learned, it doesn't matter. We tend to give a great deal of importance to that. Like we think we're like detectives. If we can find what the original cause was, then somehow we'll have solved the puzzle and then we'll be okay. But it turns out that doesn't give us good results. So instead, what we want to be discovering and seeing is, what am I doing right now? So we use movement as a way of discovering the patterns, those maladaptive patterns, as they manifest in terms of this sensory motor loop, so that it becomes conscious. So what this means is that as we explore the movements, as I often say, the most important thing is the awareness, because without awareness, and specifically conscious awareness, all we're going to be doing is rehearsing what's already established, which means we're just strengthening the existing conditioning, which is what's producing the results that we're not happy with. So conscious awareness is the key ingredient, without which nothing that we can do will be of any benefit. In fact, anything that we do will only reinforce the problem that we're coming with. So denying that there's a problem, denying that we perceive a problem, is not helpful. So we just need to be innocent in how we come to this. We just need to be like so innocent, not with all of the burden of everything that we think we know and how sophisticated we are. We need to be like little children in our innocence with regard to this, and just tell the truth, which is, I feel bad. Not in an exaggerated sense. You don't need to exaggerate how bad you feel, but just whatever bad feeling may present itself, you just want to acknowledge it, rather than whatever the usual sophisticated reaction to it is. Okay, so another couple of brief conceptual things. Okay, so we want to understand that. So how do these maladaptive habits develop? As I've said, the specific events that produce them aren't really important, but we do want to understand what are the basic patterns. Because if we don't understand the basic patterns, then it's like we're looking for a needle in the haystack. But once we understand the basic patterns, then it simplifies things for us, so that when we're looking at our experience, it gives us some more useful guidance or direction in terms of how to look. So Thomas Hanna described 3 patterns that really are the patterns that make up all of these habits. So we have virtually infinite variety of ways that these 3 patterns can combine. So there is virtually infinite variation in the ways that people experience these, because they combine in different ways. But nonetheless, once we can see the component parts and see the simplicity relatively of those component parts, it helps us to better keep it simple. It's like, that's one of those things that people say is useful, and it turns out it is, to keep it simple. So when we keep it simple, we help ourselves. So these three basic patterns, these are what Thomas Hanna called the red light, green light, and trauma reflex or trauma response. So the red light and green light, or I'll describe them in, red light and green light. These are primitive patterns that are inherited, that they're established. Then they don't only exist in humans, they exist in all or virtually all animates, beings. And so, but in humans, they even have a name. The green light reflex is called the Landau reflex when it manifests in young babies. So I think it's around 2 months of age. This reflex begins to express, which allows the baby to begin to lift its head and to begin to arch the back. So now the baby is moving moving forward. So this, it's a pattern of extension, so back bending. It allows for the person to begin to move forward. So this is what Thomas Hanna calls the green light reflex, because it's what allows us to move forward. And when this pattern becomes maladaptive, what it is that we've used it consciously or unconsciously in order to sustain some effort that was beyond our present capacities. So we were using this forcefully, and then the pattern gets stuck. We forget about it. So that's one. So it's just this pattern of extension, meaning that it's a back bend, so that the arms and legs externally rotate, so the chest opens, the back bends backward, so everything is opening up in the front. And so this was a pattern that was the dominant pattern in, at least in American culture, up until 10 or 20 years ago. And it was, go, 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 achieve, accomplish, produce. And so a lot of people have this pattern that's in their unconscious. And then the other one is the opposite, or the complement to that, is the red light reflex, which is withdrawal. So it's when everything on the front closes down. So this is also known as the startle reflex. It's very primitive. It's in all species of animals and other more primitive forms of life. So it's simply to move backward, to retreat. So there's that's the activity of how the body moves, is this pattern. So the abdomen tightens, the chest tightens, the face tightens. So now we see this is very dominant in the culture now. We talk about head forward posture, the negative effects of texting and using devices and all that. And it all has to do with this red light reflex. So we collapse on the front. And then what it also does is, because we're at the same time we're trying to look forward, we have to you have to extend in the back of the head, so creates a lot of tension here. So then we get headaches, TMJ issues, just breathing issues, tightness of the chest, anxiety, all of these sorts of digestive issues, because the whole abdominal region is held tightly. So there's all these things that flow out of that. So these are the two primary, the red light and green light. So then they combine in many ways in order to allow us to move. So if you consider, how do we move? It's always asymmetrical. So when you walk, there's one side goes forward, the other side goes back. That's how we move in space, right? So it's an interesting thing to consider if you just feel what that is to move in space, where we imagine that we're just moving forward, but actually moving forward doesn't move us forward. Green light, which is this forward, doesn't move us forward by itself. We have to actually move forward and backward at the same time in order to move forward. It's just that it's asymmetrical. We're going side to side. And so this sense that we have of being able to have, to be able to move and take action and be empowered is actually a combination of these two reflexes, but it's asymmetrical. So this is functional, but all of these patterns are functional. They're not bad. This is the thing that we have to understand. So how does this relate to our experience more broadly, is that you see how these patterns are playing out. You notice that in your life, you have experiences where you feel anxious, depressed, withdrawn, you feel stuck. You don't know how to move forward. All of this is red light. And the technologies that are dominant and the cultural attitudes that are dominant tend to reinforce that presently. So there's a lot more of this red light reflex that people are experiencing, because this is the posture that's encouraged. And so, of course, it's going to make us feel that way more. But we want to be, we can be aware of that, so that you just start to notice when you're feeling stuck, when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling that you can't move forward, when you're feeling all of these kinds of things. Just notice how are you. You'll find most likely your pelvis is it has a posterior tilt. Your abdomen is shortened, so the distance between the breastbone and the pubic bone is shortened. Your chest is collapsed. Shoulders are slightly rolled forward. The throat is kind of collapsed. So you just notice that that's going to be predominant. Jaw is going to be tight. Throat, all of this is maybe headaches. So then, or on the other hand, if you feel like you've just got to go, and then you just notice, are you arching your back? Are you, is this what's going on? So you can just be aware of that. But they're functional because they've obviously been successful patterns in allowing the life to continue. So they're not bad, but when they cannot be brought into conscious control, or even just conscious awareness, then they're maladaptive. They don't support us in an authentic way. Rather, they're limiting the experience because it's unconscious. But then you notice in this side to side. So what's happening is there's a rotation and a bending, side bending and rotation that happen at the same time in this side-to-side pattern. This is what Thomas Hanna calls the trauma reflex. So if you imagine something, as we've all had happen, something coming at the side that surprises us, what do? We side bend and rotate to try to get out of the way. And this is, again, this is just a pattern that is, it has function. It allows us to move forward, to do things. But when it's practiced in a maladaptive way and reinforced either through just because it's habitual, we're doing it all the time, or because of the intensity of the experience. So this is why we have certain things that happen to us in our lives where we're never the same after that. You know, certain accidents, we say, yeah, ever since that thing happened 30, 40, 50 years ago, it's always been, you know, my shoulder's always been tight ever since then, or I've just never walked right ever since then, or I've always had this pain in my whatever ever since then. And we have to wonder, well, why is that? Isn't that strange? Culturally, it's just accepted. Like, you know, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, they say. Just accept that, yes, this makes perfect sense that you were fine before this accident, and then you had the accident and you recovered from the accident. But despite the fact that it's been 30 years, it makes sense somehow that you have lingering effects. And actually, it's insane. So what's happened is just that these patterns were activated because of the intensity of the experience, or because of the repetition of the not quite efficient way of utilizing that pattern. It becomes unconscious and habitual. So these are but we want to see that this side thing, this what's, you know, the trauma reflex, where we're rotating and bending, this is it's asymmetrical. This is why, if you've been told, you know, you have one leg that's shorter than the other, or if you have like asymmetrical jaw stuff, or headaches that tend to be on one side, or, you know, one shoulder is whatever, then these are signs of this trauma response being locked in. So we've forgotten how to release it. So these patterns have been activated, but we've forgotten how to release them. So that's what we're wanting here. It's very important to understand, you know, taking a lot of time to cover these kind of conceptual things, but it's really important to understand that all of what we're exploring and the benefits, the outcomes that are possible, which are quite remarkable, have nothing to do with the way that we usually have been taught to understand. We've normally been taught that we have to learn how to do some new thing, that we have to take in this knowledge and we have to assimilate it, and we have to say, I understand it and I can regurgitate it and I can perform accurately. But we want to see that that's all a kind of, it's a mimicry. It's not actually to really know. It's a superficial understanding, and that's what's been touted as real understanding, but it's not. It doesn't do us the good that we're really looking for, because we can see that we have a remarkable capacity to emulate certain outcomes through an enormous variety of different approaches. So the way in which we do something can be very different. If you take 10 people and you say, okay, you know, you 10 people, you're all practiced yogis, I want you to do Virabhadrasana. Okay, all of them 10 of them will do it. It will look more or less the same to an outside observer, but the 10 people will be doing it in 10 different ways. Now this is so this is what's normally understood as learning, is that you can emulate, but you know that in your life, emulation doesn't provide you with what you want. You want to actually feel better. You can't achieve that through emulation. You're not going to get what you want by pleasing the instructor, right? You go to the, physical therapist or this, that, or the other, and you like, your job is to please them. They're teaching you, and you're supposed to show them that you've gotten what they've taught you, and you're doing it in the right, emulating it correctly. And then when it doesn't work for you, they say, well, it's something wrong with you, or you think it's something wrong with me, or you think it's just that doesn't work. Whereas actually, the problem is that there was nothing was ever given a chance to work, because there was a misunderstanding among all the participants about what would actually work. And what's going to actually work is to become consciously aware of the patterns that are maladaptive, limiting, etc. And through that awareness, to allow those patterns to release, so that you come to you come back to center, and which allows you to move, be it physically, mentally, emotionally, or to function in an efficient way, rather than in an adaptive way. We don't want to be trying to adapt to a pre-existing dysfunction, or a pre-existing parasitic function, right? So our goal is to be able to function with maximum efficiency. It's just silly to do anything other than that, because anything other than that is just going to mean over time we become more exhausted, because we have to keep on compensating. And we develop more amnesia that way, which means over time there has to be even more compensation. So with all that in mind, let's take the next half hour to explore some movement. So really, but just again, if you just understand, you can just start to feel, actually move. If you, try to move into those patterns, so that you can feel red light reflex, where you're it's like you're moving into the fetal position. So just do that for a moment, feel what that's like, and don't worry if you get it exactly right. Just just move in that direction, so that you're doing some of that pattern, and so you can feel what that's like. Notice when you're in this red light pattern, you exaggerate it a little bit, but when you're in this red light pattern, notice what this is like. Is it familiar to you? When do you experience this? For some people, you'll realize, oh, this is all the time. And for some people, you realize, well, this is certain situations I feel like this. So it's not that there's one right answer. There's just it's a truthful self-assessment. You're just discovering, when do I know this? How do I know this? How familiar is this? What are the circumstances in which I feel this? And then notice, where do you feel it? And then notice what is what are the downstream effects? Do you feel it in your, can you feel it in your breathing? Can you feel it in your digestion? Can you feel it in your emotions? Can you feel it in your thinking? Can you feel what this experience is? And then notice from here, if you just keep holding it, you start to go numb to it a little bit, but then you feeling like this is uncomfortable. So what are you going to do? Well, the way that the world works is it says, hey, you snap out of it. We need productivity. Come on, we got to go. So what do? You compensate. So you use green light to compensate for red light, but red light's still on. So notice when you go into this red light posture, then notice how, if somebody just said, we got to go, what are you going to do? Feel what that's like. So notice that in order to do that, you're not releasing the red light pattern. You're just doing something else to compensate. So feel that, and then feel in contrast, if you go into this red light, and then be aware on the front side of the body, in the face, the throat, the tongue, the chest, the fronts of the shoulders, the abdomen. Notice all of that, how you may not be, up until you consciously give attention to it, you might not notice that there's tension there, but bring your awareness and attention to the front side of the body and consciously choose to release and soften. And then slowly allow yourself to uncurl and come to an upright posture without holding on to the tension in the front side of the body. So you're moving so slowly that you're consciously releasing on the front side of the body that whole time as you come back to upright. So notice then how different this is from when you were just compensating, but still holding on to that red light pattern. Now, it might, in some ways, it's going to feel better. It has to, because you're not holding so much tension. You're not exerting so much unnecessary effort. You're not forcing yourself into these patterns that feed back into something that feels bad, because it produces what we would think of as anxiety, depression, can't move forward, stuck, frustrated. So to any release of that is going to, in some ways feel better. But notice also there's something about it that's unfamiliar, because you're not accustomed to this level of surrender. So when I say surrender, it doesn't have to be, if that seems too difficult for whatever reason, just forget about that. But just to trust in the support of your bones, just trust that your skeleton can do this without you having to constantly grip. So notice that there is, as you release that red light and you don't compensate with green light, but you're just starting to become vertical, you are trusting in the skeleton. You might even start to notice that you can be aware of the skeleton in a more enlivened way. Maybe you have a sense of where the pelvis is. Maybe you can have a sense without even, you could use your hands, but maybe even before you use your hands to verify it, just see, do you have a sense of where the iliac crests are, what's the highest point on the the hip bones? Can you just sense that internally? And then you could use your hands and place them and see if you were right. Just test yourself. Were you a little bit high? Were you a little bit low? A little bit forward? A little bit backward? But you might be surprised, especially those who have been doing this for a while, that you have some pretty good, accurate awareness of where they are. But notice that this is a different way of being in your body than what you're accustomed to. So there's more that's open, surrendered, released. That armoring that you're so accustomed to is not as prominent. And what that does, you'll notice, is there's signal coming in through the nervous system, and the brain tends to interpret it as something like, I don't like it. I'm uncomfortable. I got to protect. So that's that pattern trying to reestablish. So it's an attempt to go back into red light. And little by little, as we lose conscious awareness, that's what happens, unless we can override that with adequate learning. So that the old pattern, which is not supportive of our optimal function, naturally falls away in the light of the superior learning. So now, so now we can explore. Let's put our, if this is assuming you're sitting upright. If you're not sitting upright, I don't have a lot of advice for you today about how you could modify, but my goal is to give you enough knowledge that you can start to have confidence to explore modifications if you need on your own. But of course, if you have questions or need any specific support with that, you can let me know. But I'm going to assume here that we're sitting upright. So place your hands across the chest, whatever way is comfortable for you, actually. I don't care. You can put them like hands on the, like in the center of the chest, or you can put them all the way across. So they're resting on the shoulders, whatever works for you. I don't care. Just let it be as comfortable and restful as possible. So take a moment and notice where you're holding unnecessary effort and let that go. And then we're going to keep the head aligned for now with the shoulders. So the shoulders and head. You notice the relationship between the shoulders and the head. So you could move the shoulders without and change the relationship of the head and shoulders as I'm demonstrating here, but that's not what we're going to do. In this movement, we're going to keep the same relationship of the head and shoulders. So that what we're going to do then is turn slowly to the right without changing the relationship of the shoulders and the head, which means that you're going to be rotating the trunk. Of course, the head kind of wants to do something here, which is fine, that it wants to do that. Rather, your brain wants it to do that, but we're just going to do our best to inhibit that tendency and just let the shoulders and the head be and the neck be relaxed, and just rotating the torso and then coming back to center. So we're going to do that a few times. So notice, can you be aware of what is necessary for this movement and what is unnecessary? So that's the goal, is we want to become aware through this exploration of what's necessary and what's unnecessary, and then slowly we can start to release what's unnecessary. So we're just going to repeat this several more times at your own pace and see, we're only turning as far as is comfortable. Don't push beyond your range of comfort. So that might be a very small movement. My movement might be much bigger than your movement. Your movement might be, if that's 45 degrees, and maybe 5 degrees, maybe 10 degrees, maybe 20 degrees, whatever is comfortable for you. And then coming back to center. And so, start to just be aware, okay, is there more or less muscular tension needed as I'm rotated to the side versus when I'm forward? You might think you know the answer, but just feel into it. What is true there? And once you get clear on that, then start to feel, okay, where is the tension required? Wherever the tension is required, or whenever it is required, where is it required? So if, for example, it seems to you that there's some muscular engagement in order to rotate to the side, then you want to notice, is it symmetrical? Is it equal on both right and left sides, or is it asymmetrical? Is it more on one side than the other? Is it more on the front or more on the back? Maybe it's both front and back, but on different sides. Just want to be aware of that, just noticing. And so one way to do this is, as you rotate to the side, you get to your maximum rotation that's comfortable, and then you pause and you just release the low-hanging fruit. So whatever you notice that maybe you've got some tension in the thighs that you can release, some tension in the jaw you can release, some tension in the shoulders you can release. And then you start to notice, okay, what about between the right and left sides of the front of the abdomen? What can I release there? What about the right and left back sides of the lower portion of the torso? So you just release whatever you can release while maintaining this rotation, and then slowly release to center. So you're allowing yourself to feel that slow release. So and then you can release the hands and just stay here for a moment and notice what you are aware of. And you may recall that I introduced this notion of a pandiculation last week, or well, not last week because we had a power outage, but recently. And so then you might recall how I described that. So there's under this eccentric contraction, which means that under load, the muscle is lengthening. So, I'll give it away a little bit. I mean, just anatomically, there is some, relatively, there is more muscular engagement and when rotating versus when forward. So in order to do the rotation, there are some muscles that are contracting. So that means they're shortening. So when we come out of the rotation, those muscles are still engaged, but they're lengthening. So it's an eccentric contraction. So this is a really useful thing that we can be aware as. Particularly, we want to be aware all the time, but we can really give a great deal of attention to noticing what happens as we come out of the rotation. So you can feel that as you rotate to the maximum range that's comfortable, not straining, pause, release whatever you can release. So you have a sense, okay, I have more awareness of the sensation, the significance of the sensation. I can tell that I'm releasing unnecessary effort in these areas. Great. Now I want to maintain that, right? Because if I'm coming out of this rotation, I'm definitely not going to need more muscular engagement to come out of it than to maintain the maximum, right? So as I'm coming out of it, it's going to require less and less engagement until I come to neutral, in which there's the minimum engagement. Well, of the rotational muscles, there should be zero engagement when I'm just forward. So as I'm releasing that rotation, I should, what I'm wanting to be aware of is the same, maintaining the same level of non-engagement. So no increase in engagement. It should, if I'm able to rotate maximally with a certain level of release, then as I'm coming out of that rotation, that same level of release should, at a minimum, that same level of release should be consistent throughout. Hopefully that makes sense. So, but what you'll notice is that there's a habit as you're coming out of the rotation, because your nervous system doesn't yet have the confidence, it's going to fall back into those old patterns. So it's going to re-engage unnecessary muscular effort. So that's why we repeat it slowly with awareness, allowing the same level of release to continue throughout that as we come back to neutral. Okay. So then you pause and you just notice that here, as you're just neutral, just forward, having done that, you have now more awareness of the parts of you that do that rotation, and as well as the parts of you that don't need to do that rotation, but that think they used to not they really, but that you used to think needed to be engaged for the rotation. See, so we have all of these patterns that engage parts of us that don't need to participate. It's like you, maybe if you've ever been part of an organization that does meetings, maybe you know that you get, like, you're invited to the meeting and you're halfway through the meeting, you realize, why was I invited to this meeting? I'm not even needed here. It's like, it has nothing to do with me, but this is what a good portion of our internal resources are being drawn into these things where they're not needed. So it's very inefficient, but that's what we're learning here to release. Okay, so you just want to notice that, and then we're going to do this to the other side. So put your hands across the chest in whatever way is comfortable for you, and notice how, there's, you do it one way that feels like the right way. You just notice that you just do it that way. Do it the other way. So you're crossing the other way. So I have a tendency to put the right arm first and then the left arm over that one, but you want to do it the opposite way now. So just this, you notice how just doing this changes everything. So it's worth just feeling that for a moment. Your whole sense of what is forward and what's balanced and what's right, and how to understand where you are in the world is changed pretty significantly when you just change the cross of the arms or hands. And this makes sense because the way, subtly is going to bring one shoulder, tendency to bring one shoulder more forward than the other, depending on which arm is crossed over which. It's asymmetrical. Same is true of interlacing the fingers. So that's another similar kind of exercise that can be really helpful, is because the way in which you cross the fingers alters the perception of all the way up into the shoulders and into the back and everything. So that's an aside. Okay, so we're gonna have the arms crossed. And then we're going to keep the head and shoulders in the same relationship throughout the movement, and we're going to just rotate the trunk to the left, just as far as is comfortable. And if it's not comfortable to stay here, to pause here, then just ease up a little bit and do a little bit less and see if you can pause there, because we want to be able to pause for a little bit just to notice what this is like, notice our habits. So you might notice that there's some tension on one side of the neck. You might notice there's tension on one side of the jaw. You might notice tension on one side of the head, tension in one eye versus the other. You might notice some tension in the tongue, tension in the throat. Might notice tension in the shoulders. So you just notice what you can release and then come back to neutral. So here's another important point. It's implicit in what we've been doing, but I want to make it explicitly, is that when we're doing this activity, so we're just turning to one side at a time. We're not turning from side to side. We're just turning from one side and then back to neutral. So we want to be clear on that through that whole entire pattern. So, and what I mean is, so we're going to do this several more times at your own pace. So we're going to rotate to the left, and then notice that when you come back to center, just allow yourself to release into center. So avoid the temptation to indulge the compensatory patterns, meaning we have patterns because all of us are a little bit out of whack, a little bit not quite on center, a little bit asymmetrical in our patterning, not necessarily in our structure, but in our patterning. And so, but our nervous system has us always orienting forward. So there's all kinds of compensations. The eyes are compensating, the neck is compensating, the jaw is compensating, the shoulders are compensating, this whole spine is compensating. So we want to avoid just engaging those compensatory patterns. We want to rotate, pause, release the low-hanging fruit, be aware of exactly what is necessary and do only that much and no more, and then slowly release that, so that that singular pattern, that singular movement pattern is slowly released. And through the release of that singular pattern, not the complex of compensatory patterns, but just that singular pattern, we get clear on that and on the compensatory patterns at the same time, which we can then release, but not habitually engage. Hopefully that makes sense. So just a few more times at your own pace, rotating. Let go of any unnecessary effort in the thighs, in the buttocks, in the jaw, head, neck, shoulders. Be aware of the asymmetrical experience between the both front and back and left and right. And then slowly release that singular pattern. And if you want to do one more, you're welcome to. If you feel done, you are welcome to be done. But whenever you're done, then we're not fully done yet, but done with that movement, then you're going to just release you're forward and you're going to release the arms. Close the eyes if that's comfortable for you, and just notice what this experience is like. So you've learned something, you've become aware of something. It doesn't mean your thinking mind has accurate thoughts about any of it. So that's not what we're wanting to notice, but you're noticing that you're aware of yourself in space. So this is called proprioception, that this is enlivened. It might seem pleasant, it might seem strange because it's different, It might even seem uncomfortable. These are all possibilities, but you just notice that you're aware, you're awake to it. It's got your attention. It's like, what is this? This is something, this is interesting. And we just want to allow that. So this is the integration. We have to allow it to integrate, because if we don't, then it was a little bit of a waste. We've taken all this time to become aware of something, and it's never fully a waste, but we want to make maximum use of that. We want to gain maximum benefit, and the way to do that is to allow the awareness of this pattern to really integrate into the whole nervous system. And one valuable way to do that is just pause and just feel and notice. And you can really, as you become sensitive to it, you can start to notice all these impulses of the nervous system to correct, to compensate, and how you start to see how it's playing out at all levels of experience. So it's what we would normally think of as bodily sensation, but it's also what we would consider to be mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual, all of these things, because we start to notice they're just impulses, patterns, habits in the nervous system. So we're just noticing those. And as you notice that there's just this impulse, like, that gets interpreted as, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like this, I should do something else, I feel agitated, or I feel sleepy, or I feel that, or whatever. All of these impulses are really just part of the same two-sided phenomenon that I've described, that one side is the sensory portion, the other is the motor portion. So you see how it's constantly there operating. These impulses arise out of habit. We react quickly. That keeps that pattern going. But here we're allowing this new learning to integrate. So you're just noticing and just continuing to rest. You just keep resting and noticing. And through the resting and noticing, what's happening is there's a repatterning, greater efficiency and greater ease in the nervous system, because your nervous system is now gaining benefit of this learning, which is that, oh, I have more choice. I don't have to react so quickly. I am safe. It's okay to just watch. These are all really, really important lessons that we need to learn and relearn, because they just like what it is that we're doing here is we're learning what is safe, what is not safe. And those maladaptive patterns just basically said, well, the red light one definitely is just like, nothing's safe. And the green light is, I've got to, doesn't matter if it's safe or not, I've just got to go. And we're wanting to realize, I can pause, I can rest, I can relax, I can observe, I don't have to do anything, and I am safe. I am safe to be here. So it's so powerful, and it just keeps on working wherever we are in the process. It's that simple. It just keeps working, and it's further developing the nervous system to be more resilient, more uh, better adapted, so that bit by bit our experience is what we would consider to be better. So that's all for today. As often I point out, you may have any number of perceptions of your experience today, ranging from, you might it might be like huge experience, to a sense of, yeah, whatever, who cares, nothing happened. Whatever your experience is, wherever it falls on that spectrum or outside of the spectrum, the thing to understand that will help you tremendously is just that it is working. It doesn't matter. Your opinion of it is really irrelevant, because our judgments, we don't have the perspective to judge. You do it every day for a year, then you look back and then you see, oh yes, okay, I didn't see it then, but now it's clear. So just don't believe your thoughts, unless your thoughts are screaming at you, I'm in pain and I'm unsafe, in which case listen to the thoughts just enough to respect that you don't push. That's the feedback there, is like, whoa, buddy, slow down. But but just be gentle, be very gentle, because it's an enormous amount of learning taking place, a lot of transformation taking place at a somewhat subtle level. So you want to just know that you might be a little bit extra sensitive. You might notice things in ways that you wouldn't normally notice them. You might notice things you wouldn't normally notice. So all these things are possible. Just be gentle, nourish yourself, be kind to yourself. Don't push yourself. Just be aware and listen, and you'll start to notice that life is an answer to your prayer. It is delivering to you exactly what you most desire. Open to that. Be deliberate and deliberately gentle, deliberately kind. You'll see that. So, whatever your needs are, sometimes the needs will present, like, because of sometimes all the learning, you might feel tired. If you feel tired and you want to take a nap and you have that luxury, please do. It'll be very supportive. If you don't have that luxury, but you're feeling tired, then take at the very least, and this is good advice across the board, take 1 minute pauses several times throughout the day, just to tune into your breath and relax the breath and allow the breath to be as satisfying and natural as possible. That will be very, very helpful. And as always, if you have any doubts, concerns, questions, or anything else that you want help with, you are more than welcome to reach out and let me know. So you can email me. Those of you who have access to the messenger group, you can use that. Okay, so that's it for now. Thank you, everybody, for joining me as always, and blessings to you all. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.